Welcome, welcome, welcome to Wednesday stream. So, I was thinking about what I want to do today while I was in the car today running errands, and I decided that we are just going to work on bass lines. So, let's start a new track, new project entirely, actually. And then we can just take this through the process. We'll call it 130. Never gonna find this again. Uh-oh. Penny is chasing a fly, and she's back near my cables. Okay, new track. And this will also help me explain where everything comes from when I start, if you jump in and you're like, what the hell is going on? So, we have the bass in track 4. Well, actually, do we have bass in track 4? Because I have been thinking about using these three, because the Fader Fox is being controlled, is controlling tracks 1 through 6, and it might be easier for my brain if these three are rhythm, and these three are like melodic or additional to some extent. So, yeah, let's try it. And we're just gonna treat this like starting from scratch, put a trig on here. One thing I also like to do, just move all of these hold values to minimum, because I have these knobs controlling release. So this is like track 5 release, and that gives me more control over how the sounds are played. So bass is now here. I've already put a trig there, release infinite, and track 6 is my kick. We're going to set that up. Chains, no, it's under hits, kick. And then lo-fi original. I think I'm going to go with lo-fi. I usually go with that. Hey, Gleb. No, actually, the cats are actually surprisingly good. I think if I had gotten the wrong cats, then I would be dealing with that issue of having them chew on cables and other things, but they've been pretty good about that, luckily. So this is kick. Fader Fox controls volume of tracks. Okay, so Fader Fox is controlling, let's just take track 1 as an example. We've got volume here, and I have to be careful with this because it actually does go all the way to 63, but I actually like that. I chose to control volume over level because this lets me go past maximum, so I can still tweak it, and then I use this for like, oh, I need this to be relatively less. These two are for bass and width of the effect filter. So I can control those from here. The only issue is if I switch the effect of effects block 1 to like a different thing, it'll control whatever those two knobs are. So for the most part, I keep this as a filter, and I occasionally make the mistake of trying to control it without a filter on. And then release is at the end here. So like for example with track 5, track 5's release for the kick, or sorry, track 6's release for the kick. And then usually what I do with track 5 is I turn it into a chain of samples. So if we go into my chains, let's go with Lin. Actually, let's go with SP12. So what a chain is it's just actually a bunch of sounds on a single waveform and then sliced into individual pieces of that waveform. So I can go into slice, and I have to switch it to slice. And it's each of those individual pieces of the waveform for those uninitiated here. So if I played a bunch of things, oops. Right? And then I can adjust the I can also record the parameters as they're being turned. So oh, I realized I hadn't done it on time with this. So it should be, I need to move this over to right there. So I can actually save a performance of my release. And you'll see that these green lights indicate that parameters have been recorded in. Hey Rustic, thanks for joining everybody. But usually things are a little less complicated. I mean, all I'm trying to do most of the time is give myself some kind of like a hi-hat layer. Or claps. I also like to change my scale mode here to per track, so that gives me a master of, let's say, 32. And actually, for the most part, I like to keep things at 32, but if I want to extend things out, I can do that. So I can have, I can have the master be 64 steps and then have a single track be only playing one bar, so I have a better sense of what's going on. Like for example, my kick, I don't really want to have a second page, so maybe I just go to one page. I'm gonna switch this to slice so I can control. Yeah, so this is actually a set of samples that I made into a single chain on Ableton. I liked these kicks, and they've kind of been my go-to kicks for a while on the Octatrack. I only use maybe like 3 or 4 of them. I use slice 3, slice 1, and slice 4 the most. Yeah, thanks Alex for your enthusiasm, and thanks for being here. So today I wanted to focus primarily on bass lines. I realized, I was reflecting on it today, that I think I've just been like giving myself too many things to do. And one of the things that I could really work on is generating interesting bass lines. I think I get bogged down in like, how do I save samples and all that other stuff? But maybe I start with bass lines and then work from there. So first we're going to start by setting up this project, how I usually set it up. And we're not going to dive into anything that I'm not going to use. So we're just going to work with what we need. So we have a kick track on 6, a chain on 5. We have an additional rhythm section in track 4. So I'm going to put something there, which is a little bit less standard. It's just kind of going to be something that I think is interesting. So what does this sound like? I don't really like that very much. Let's go to Crate Diggers. Percussion loops, this should be fine. I've definitely played with these before. all I did there was I took a trigless trig. Instead of triggering a slice, I'm just telling it to change parameters. So I changed it down a pitch so I could get that little like second bar. It seems my restream chat is causing some multiple chats. I don't know. I don't know if that's YouTube or if that's me doing that, but whatever. It helps me see it anyway. Rustic is very happy to be here. And then, you know, this is where you start to build on things, and today isn't really about that, but, you know, for example, I could take this trigless trig and add the delay send here. Is everything working on the stream, by the way? Is everything like looking normal on YouTube right now? I just set up my restream chat on my laptop so I could look at it. And my stream is actually connected on this computer. So let me know if there's anything weird going on the receiving end, besides the fact that every chat seems to be duplicated like 3 times over. So, speaking of Minotaur, we're going to get into it, because that's kind of the theme for me today. We're on channel 1 with the Minotaur, and so the goal today is to play with specific patches and find cool bass lines to save into patterns. And I actually am going to look up the Minotaur manual so that I can also map some of the CC messages or CC channels into it. And that'll be a good way that you guys can see how you can use the Octatrack to control CC messages and then also control LFOs. Because I was thinking about that today when I was listening to some techno on the way to running some errands, that like just choosing places where you have multiple LFOs running on like filter, for example, can be a really interesting way to vary up a single melody. So, I mean, we can start with like a simple bass line here. Cool. Sorry if I moved a little quickly there. Basically, what I just did was I created a bass line that feels a little bit different because I created a conditional trig where this only plays every second time. So it gives you essentially the effect of a 2-bar loop on a single bar, so it's just easier for me to see it. So if I solo that, let's use quick mute since I've been trying to practice that. If I just want to hear the kick, it's track 6. Skips it the first time, plays it the second time. And you can even say I want to set this to retrig. Maybe I create one at the very end here, and I tell it to play 20% of the time, 25% of the time. But I also give it a retrig of 2. That means that every time this gets triggered, it's going to play twice. And I'm going to increase the release because the release affects the sound of the retrig. So you could have retrig set to infinite, but if your release is short, it's only going to play out for that amount of time. So 25% chance for that to play twice. And then you have like, you know, a lot of different weird things going on. You know, you could build a single 1-bar pattern with a lot of different variations. Yeah, when you're working with distortion, you really want to be careful about levels because it can really change the way something sounds. Like notice if I keep this at full, it's just like getting in the way a lot. So let's say that that's the one that I want to keep. Let's move on to pattern 2. Copy paste. Let's change up some things. What do we want to change? Well, actually, let's start by taking out the hi-hat in the first pattern, saving that for the second one. And actually, in the first pattern, we can keep this to 1 bar because the second bar is now a copy of the first. So here's pattern 2 now, and maybe we switch this to start. Yeah, that sounds good. I mean, it's hard to tell a little bit, but if I mute the percussion, maybe you'll hear it. And actually, I'm gonna set this to only play the first time out of 2, and this to only play the second time. So yeah, I'm generating a kick pattern that I can see in a single page, but is actually doing a lot of different things. So do I ever use the DJ EQ? I rarely use the DJ EQ, and maybe I should. I also, I wish there was a way to reduce the amount of duplications there are in this comment section, but oh yeah, that's a good point. Do some filtering on the percussion. That's a good point. I'm gonna do that. Maybe like a free filter here. Filter bass. Yeah, and then I heard this thing today from Yalisa Hall, if anybody's heard of Yalisa Hall. Great stuff. I'm gonna go like this. I think what I heard Yalisa Hall, which I think is actually a man, but they did like a flanger on a hi-hat and it just sounded so cool. Maybe it was a phaser? No. No. I don't think it's flanger anymore. I think it's phaser. But I also think that the effect that they were using was something a little more complex than what the Octatrack provides. Phaser with, yeah, maybe I'll go with lo-fi instead of reverb. It's so present when you give it that stereo. And we're going into another part pretty dang quickly, but we're just going to go with it because that's kind of what I really enjoy about starting a new project is how open the audio pool is. It's like, I'm just going to go, I can start fresh, you know? So I'm going to do that. And I'm just going to try throwing in some new. Oh yeah, hold on. There's a lot of delay on that one thing that I told it to do. I'm going to turn that off. Yeah, so like maybe pattern 1 is here. Pattern 2. Pattern 3. A bit too crazy, so what if we switch that back to the original kick, copy it. I think it needs more anchoring, and I think this hi-hat is getting in the way, so we're going to change that back to claps. And actually, you know what's funny? I've been looking for this hi-hat thing in this track, trying to make it manually, and this thing already had a hi-hat thing that was going the whole time. Maybe we pass that, switch that over to here. And I want to take this original bass line and do some things to it. So this was kind of what was on my mind before wow, there are a lot of copies of that comment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I think somehow having restream between two computers is really like confusing it. And you can only see it on the screen, which is good. Oh, shit. But it does kind of confuse me. Anyway, so one of the things that was on my mind when I started this, before I started the stream today, was how do you vary up a bass line? And if you guys have seen some of the streams in this past week, I've been using an iPad to generate alternative melodies, but with specific rules. So for example, there's this app that I use called Patterning, which lets me pick exactly which notes will be selected, but then I can also randomize the range of notes that are chosen with like a midpoint in mind. And the Octatrack can do this to some extent. There are two ways that I'm thinking about doing it. One of them I've already tried a few times, which is you set the key in the ARP. So I think this was, this is G sharp. it's because I just changed this to F sharp minor. Turn that off. So this is an A, I think. Nope. Is that really a G sharp? So I think I need to do a C minor in order to keep the notes that I already have. Cool. And so if I take a, let's create an LFO. The LFO controls the transposition of the ARP. And the ARP, which is locked to C sharp minor, right? Hold on. C. Right, I keep forgetting that it's not C sharp. It's in C minor, so whatever notes that I tell it to move around, it's going to snap to those. Okay, I'm just going to close Restream chat and see if that fixes things. And then I'm just going to open, hold on, I'm going to open YouTube. Okay, cool. So one way of doing this, you take an LFO, like maybe a triangle wave, you adjust the speed. And one way of testing this is we can just straight up clean out this pattern, this MIDI pattern, and increase the depth, increase the length of the note, because that affects how long the ARP plays. And if we just pick a single note at the very beginning, and let's give it 1 bar for now. Right now it is taking the depth and then applying it to this single note because the ARP is not on. So basically it's transposing it to a different value because I set this to transpose. So if I have the ARP on to true, now I have the depth being affected on every based on the speed of this multiplier. And what this tells me is that this LFO is too fast because it's basically playing the minimum and maximum between each other. And this is also, this LFO is not mapped to any anything in the track, it's just going free. So if we set this to trig sync trig, now this is going to repeat at the beginning of the sequence. So that's like only mildly interesting to me because it doesn't sound very good. But one thing you can do is you can start extending it and then you can start, building other ideas in. So say I have these, have the default set so that there isn't an ARP going on. And I believe that's a C now, yeah. So maybe we take this ARP, or sorry, maybe we take this bass line from before. We paste it in. Maybe we just apply the ARP to this particular section of the bass line. So now, and because this LFO is resetting at the beginning of this particular sequence, we're going to get the same melody every time. Now what if I set this to free? Right? And that's kind of interesting, but it also, you know, it's always going to be either up or down. You could also set it to random, which is a little bit more complicated. And we can also start, you know, littering the pattern with sections that do that. Right? So maybe I take this and I give it a delay so that it's... Why am I not hearing delay? Oh, because I keep thinking the bass line is on track 4 because I used to do it that way. Put the bass line on track 3, give it less of a... And then maybe I give this, so I'm noticing that the bass line is kind of like arguing with itself a little too much. So I'm going to do some quick things. I'm going to adjust an LFO so that it's giving the bass line some stereo motion. And if you have some headphones, you'll be able to hear that. And now once I set the stereo of the delay on, the delay will start playing the opposite pan of wherever that position was. And one thing I can also do is, I don't really want to do it. I was going to say that I could take wherever this bass line is changing, like right there, 10, and go to my audio section and set 10 so that the delay is on, and then set it off for the most part. Do the same thing for wherever this comes back in, which I believe is at 9. So pattern 2, number 9, set that to max. So now it's only gonna create the delay section in those randomized places. So now the bass line, as like the core of the bass line is preserved. Yo, Def. Good to see you again. Actually, I'm gonna clear up some of the delay things that are happening because I think they're getting a bit distracting. So clear that one out. So now the delay is only happening in that first. Cool. So that's like the first way that I have of randomizing elements of the bass line, because ever since I was doing it on patterning, I was like, no, there are other ways to do it on the Octatrack directly. So I've been kind of exploring those ways. The other way, which is potentially more interesting, is to, let's go to part 3 now, which is a copy of part 2 right now. Now that we're on this new pattern and this new part, I want to show you this new way of arpeggiating, which is potentially helpful. And it still has some limitations, but we'll go through that. So basically, we're going to turn the key off in this case. And clear this pattern. Let's switch. What I'm referring to is taking this ARP in the menu and adjusting the notes relative. So these numbers are representing what notes are in the ARP. So I think we're going to go with that many. And then I'm going to turn this one off. How do I do that? Just by hitting it, I think. Yeah. And if I just, hold on, I have to exit this menu. If I just have the ARP on, it's going to go through that ARP. But the problem is that track 8, oh, right, I have to set the length to 7. I think I want to give it echo this time, or sorry, reverb. I'm going to copy the interesting, this thing over here. But that was actually only the beginning of what I wanted to show you, because there's also an option to set the ARP to randomize. So that basically means pick any one of these notes that I have pre-selected. And I mean, they're not notes, they're transpositions of the original note. So if this is C, this is like, you know, this is 0 steps from C, this is 2 steps above, this is 3 steps, you can go below 2, be like, that. Let's just make a new pattern. And then, sorry, I'm just kind of getting creative here, but giving it a 4 on the floor, and clearing this out for a hi-hat. But that's only like mildly interesting too. I mean, it is interesting, more interesting than what we started with at the beginning, but the thing that I want to do now is, you know, the thing I liked about using the iPad app was you can choose exactly what notes are played, not just choose a key, but choose exactly which notes, which being somebody who knows which notes will work and which won't, or at least likes to think that, I like to pick them. And the analog to that on the aux track is you create an ARP with the notes that you like, and then you choose randomize. I think. And one thing that's kind of interesting about it is, say we take, you know, let's make this a little simpler. We'll pick let's pick 8 notes for the length. And we'll set 4 of them to a 5th above. So that's just, you know, sorry, these 2 are deactivated. 5th. Right? Set this to random. And that's what's confusing me, because why would this play in order if it was randomized? Is it because it's only picking randomly from that selection? I'm just kind of confused because I thought it would pick any one of these 8 at random. So like, maybe move these down to that. Because it sounds like it's playing them in order to me. I'm pretty dang sure it's doing that. Oh, it's because it's playing these notes at random. Ugh, so stupid. Because, I mean, that's a lot less versatile, you know, and it's a lot more annoying to set up, because basically what that means is I can clear this whole thing. Be like, sorry, I'm just making them flat notes again. And what it means is that I can take this and adjust exactly what notes are involved in this. 10. Now if I set this to on, for example, up, right, down, and random. The probability is a lot less interesting because now, you know, I could make, you know, 2 of them D sharp. So now it's like a 50-50 chance that it's a D sharp. What is kind of interesting about this though, and by the way, this is something that I never do. I've never really gone in and like played with the arpeggiator with the notes that are programmed in here, because there's usually other arpeggios that I can work with. But one thing that I guess is kind of interesting about this is if you set the length to 1/16, you know, this is just going to be a regular note. It's not going to get to the other notes because the speed of the ARP is 16th notes. Oh, well, it is going to pick notes within these choices. So I guess, you know, what I've just created is, you know, you set the mode to randomizer for the arpeggiator, and now any of these notes is going to be one of these 4 here. So I guess if you set this to off, but what's weird to me is if it's off, why is it still playing the fourth note? Why wouldn't it play the first note? That just seems backward to me. That the fourth of these notes would be the first one triggered. Because like that whole system just doesn't inspire creativity in me. It's like, why would I don't want to have to think about what note this fourth note is if the ARP is off. Because what would be cool is if I just set this to one single note like I have, and then have the root note playing, and then whenever I want it to play more, or play a random note, I go like this. It's just so bizarre to me that the ARP is only controlled by Yeah, I'm honestly a lot less excited about this whole ARP note relationship thing that I'm trying to build here. But, you know, you live and learn. Like, that's something that maybe some of you might be more interested in. But for me, like, the most interesting thing about this whole ARP menu, and maybe I did this a long time ago and just forgot, but the most interesting thing is being able to set the key. Because what I want is like immediacy. I don't want to have to, like, one thing that I thought would be interesting is if the randomize mode was controlling which note on the ARP you were picking, then you could create a scale of your own within the ARP and then have it pick, you know, one of those. But having it control these notes is a lot less interesting, and especially even less interesting if all of these then affect, you know, what the note is if the ARP is off. Because that's like, I mean, it just doesn't work with what I'm doing. So take this bass line, bring it back. And then we're just gonna Actually, we're going to do a similar thing to how we were messing with the last pattern before we started all this other stuff. Da-da-da-da-da, bump, da-da-da-da-da. So right, so that's kind of cool, right? So this particular note I like, so I'm going to take the through machine and mark that, give it like reverb. And then maybe I set this to legato on. Increase glide. Getting into kind of electro-y territory here, which isn't a problem. Oof. So that is set to loop on, and it doesn't need to be. Cool. And let's just skip this bank and move on to another one. Copying this part over, sorry, to here. And then now we have a blank slate again. And we can just start with a single kick. Where's the kick? Ah. And what I want to do is just add some kind of additional rhythm here to start things off. How about taiko stuff? Okay. Now, which program do we choose? And I kind of purposely chose this section here to be 2 static machines because I wanted to play with samples I already have. And just kind of be a little free about how I use them. I think there's like one too many things happening. Hold on. And I can also just throw in another chain. Oops, pattern setting. Shit, okay. So I guess I'm just kind of doing whatever comes to mind. I was originally going to be working on bass lines, but I'm also just kind of interested in seeing where this goes. Yeah, something that I saw that was kind of cool. I was listening to a track by The Field, and one of the things that I noticed was that like there was I think it was a Daniel Avery track where the length of it was like set to do some kind of looping effect that was really short, and you could actually hear it happening. Yeah, so if I was to take, this is kind of tricky because these loops are not synced up. So if I was to pick a loop that was synced up, like say, not one of those, but you know, in my Crate Diggers thing, melodic loops, cool. Cool, cinema thing, whatever. So this is playing, if I set it to length, now this length thing adjusts what's going on here. So you'll start to see, you know, how long is it going to play that. And actually, maybe if I slice it, I'll get even more control. So slice it, set it to slice the length to 1, too short. Maybe based on slice. And if I make it even shorter. And so then you start getting a little bit more ability to shape what's going on. Maybe if we set this to even shorter. The problem is this one's like one note. All kinds of ways you can glitch up. I never use this retrig thing, but I'm also just kind of using this as an opportunity to play with that. Source retrig. What if we take an LFO and we just go change the time of the retrig? Oh my god. Slow it down. and then set this to 32, and then give it random locks. Oh wow. What you're hearing is the speed of the LFO on the time changing. Let's just keep switching samples until we like something. I already like it. And we're starting to get into new territory, so let's copy and paste to pattern 2. Actually, pattern 5, because I want to give these things room to grow. Copy this part to part 2. And, you know, assign this to part 2, assign this to part 1, and kind of just work backwards a little bit and clean this up. That was actually really dope. Hold on. Just this kind of like yeah, so what I want to do is give this 2 bars and clear the second bar. And then what's interesting is that when I set this to an empty pattern, the things that are told to continue playing are already giving me and now that this is a part 2, we can tell this to start silent. Maybe I set it to that. So track 4. So now let's try it. cool. I can just be playing with this. And then we take that and copy it over to the next section. Maybe change the pattern a little bit. And since this is a new pattern, we can change all kinds of things. Copy that, paste it here. Okay, let's give it a little bit more rhythm. Where do we have that? We have modular down tempo. I had, oh yeah, cymatics. I had this like weird organic percussion thing that I like to draw on every once in a while. The beep is too hard. These are fun. Okay, this one's pretty great. Okay. Let's see what the second bar sounds like. Now, what does the bass line for something like this sound like? And now that we're in the second part, you can freely, play with whatever these notes are going to be and change the patch. I'm actually kind of into that 808 type thing. And again, we're going to bring this down a little bit. What confuses me is, you know, sometimes these hotkeys, I don't know if they're actually doing anything. Like glide, why are you not turning off? What is? Oh, I'm switching between patches. Fuck. And once I set it to the initial patch, it all of a sudden started working again. Did it? No, it didn't. Cool. So we're now going to set the ARP to do stuff. I'm just kind of thinking of ways that you can control the ARP. One of those ways is to use your set the speed to something really high so that the notes are never actually triggering. That's kind of sloppy though. So right now I have it set so that the mode is off. The length is infinite, so that I can keep default. But what I need to do now is take this LFO, give it some form. Let's give it a triangle wave. That's what it's called, right? Yes, triangle wave. Sync it to the 2-bar loop so that it repeats. And then start playing with the depth. And actually, what if I turned it on without the... That's actually pretty cool. I think we're going to give it a key. So, A major. Sure. Sounds like a Crash Bandicoot level or something. Yeah, so kind of into it, kind of not into it. I think what I just need to do is see where I can mess with. I think what's fucking me up is that I don't actually know what key this is in. Dun, dun. Why is it doing that? Why would these two notes be so far apart? Oh, because the LFO is probably on by default. Yeah, it is. So let's adjust the LFO for the parts that I want. So now we're in. I can put it in B major or minor. So let's do minor. I just think that these things need to be a bit different because all it's doing is playing the octaves, but it needs to play some. Yeah, so I guess to explain what's happening here, I have, these two notes are set in stone. These are just, notes. And then this is an ARP along with this and this. And in order to pick the notes that I like, I'm just kind of shuffling it around. I've adjusted the depth of this LFO so that it's picking different notes. I'm actually pretty okay with that, but these two are a bit wild, so I'm basically going to start adjusting where they start. And you can adjust the speed, the depth of the LFO, and the notes to get some different results. Like, we're going to take this and move it up. Yeah, so, going back to where we started with this, we start with something like that. I actually think that the melody in the bass has a bit too many notes. Do-do. And actually what I could do, which is kind of interesting, 4-bar loop here, but the through machine I can set it to 2 bars, and I can mute the second bar here. So now it's only giving me every other bar. is like my favorite part for some reason. Hold on, trying to find where this rhythm is. Oh, here. It's right here. Where the fuck? Oh, it's because I have it set to distortion. Damn it, I did the thing. There we go. The things that I get excited about. So maybe we'll have a rave beat to really just tie everything together so it sounds cool. White label, old school. I'm actually really not into that bass line. Maybe just 3 notes. And then we mute it with the bass thing again. Yeah, I just feel a bit weird about how yeah, I definitely liked the first breakbeat first. So just to recap real quick, what we've got here is these 2 tracks are not being used. This track is a kick. This track is extra rhythm. Not a lot. 4 is supposed to be other rhythm, which is being played in this pattern here. Track 3 is a bass line, which is used sometimes. And then track 2 is this, you know, these tracks 1 and 2 I kind of left pretty variable because in previous sessions I've been using it as a place to put samples that I'm creating on the fly. And so that might be what it is used for. At the moment I'm kind of also using it, like depending on the pattern, to add additional layers. So like here. And then track 1, I don't know if it does anything. Oh yeah, it does that weird glitchy thing. It's kind of funny that you can just keep the track, this note going. And actually, that's kind of one of the problems here is I'm sharing the patch between parts 1 and 2 in the sense that both of them are referencing patch 6. But what's weird about the Octatrack is it doesn't actually reset that patch unless you like tell it to specifically. So you end up with some annoying carries over from, you don't get to reset it. Like unless I hit stop twice, then I'll get that, double. Then I'll get that reset. So maybe I need to switch the patch on part 2. Okay, so those are the ideas that I've come up with today. My cats are fighting outside. It's distressing me. Ever since I just in the Minotaur software, it's really extended the life of like some of these patches. Like I can just turn this and it'll create some really cool variations. Thank you, Kick Cat. yeah, so I think that's kind of where I'm going to leave things today. Thanks for checking that out. I kind of want to do a bit more when it comes to bass lines, and I think today was laying some ground, what works and what doesn't work, what things aren't worth trying, like this whole ARP thing. I learned something about how this works, and I don't really find myself that interested in it, so probably going to skip that next time. But I do want to keep on with this bassline generation stuff, because sometimes I think I get a bit distracted by too many moving pieces. So I'm going to stay with the bass lines and see how far I can take them. And then once I have, banks of patterns of bass lines with beats, then I'll start bringing in the iPad maybe again. So thanks again for chilling, and have a great rest of your day. See y'all on Friday afternoon, 2 p.m. PST. Cheers.